Let me turn on my mic. Becca, would you do roll call, please?
Commissioner Andy Couch. He's online. He's here. Pete Probasco.
Present.
Gabe Kidder.
Here.
Howard Delo.
Present.
Larry Engel.
Here.
Tim Hale. Absent. Bill Gamble.
Here.
Kendra Zamzow.
Here.
Jim Sykes.
Here.
Do we have a quorum?
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Becca. I'd like to do a land acknowledgement here. We acknowledge that we are meeting on traditional lands of the Dena'ina and Dena'ina people, and we are grateful for their continued stewardship of the land, fish, and wildlife throughout time immemorial. Howard, would you lead us in Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Commission members, you have the agenda before you. Could I get a motion to accept?
I so move.
It's been moved in second. Are there any suggested changes? Jim?
Mr. Chairman, I would just like to give a very brief notice about the upcoming meetings with the North Pacific Fisheries Management Council. It'll be very brief. And we could do that under the NOAA presentations after they're done.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Please note. Anything else? Is there any objections to the agenda? Hearing none, the agenda stands. So the purpose of, the main part of tonight's meeting is to have a dialogue between the Fish and Wildlife Commission and the Alaska Department of Fish and Game. And I appreciate you guys taking the time to be here. And I also appreciate Mayor DeVries for canceling our meeting last time because it was pretty treacherous for us to meet. And I appreciate everybody understanding that. So with that, Matt, would you like to make a few opening statements, please?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just, first of all, thank the commission for inviting us. I always appreciate the opportunities to come and speak with you and the public, and also echo appreciation for canceling the meeting last week because it was pretty icy. This week we do have headquarters staff is in a meeting in Cordova, so I'll just take this time and do introductions of the staff that we have here and online. My name is Matt Miller. I'm with the Division of Sport Fish. I am a management coordinator, which means I get the honor to work with the area managers, the sport fish managers in Cook Inlet, which is Samantha Osland here up out of the Palmer office, Phil Stacy down in Kenai, and Mike Booz down in the Homer office. So with us today, we have Samantha Osland, who's our area manager. We have Oliver Queren, our new hired assistant manager. We got Parker Bradley, who's our pike biologist, and Nick Dukovich is here, our research biologist. And then online, I believe we have Tim McKinley, who is our regional research biologist. And then we also have some commercial fisheries staff down in Soldotna who are joining us on Teams. And I'll pass it over to Colton if you're there.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I'm Colton Lipka. I'm the area management biologist for Upper Cook Inlet Commercial Fisheries. And with me tonight from the commercial fisheries staff, we have Kyle Gatt, who is the research biologist for the area, Anna Friedman-Peel, the assistant research biologist, and Lucas Stump, who is the assistant commercial management biologist.
Thank you, Colton. And I'd also like to introduce from the Alaska State Troopers in the back, please. Thank you for being here. Appreciate that. Do we have any NOAA staff here? Any NOAA staff online?
Yes, hello, this is Rich Brenner with the National Marine Fisheries Service. Do you hear us okay?
Thank you, Adam. Anybody else that you'd like to introduce?
Yeah, this is Rich Brenner with the National Marine Fisheries Service in Juneau, and we're joined here today by Adam Zaleski, who's the in-season manager for the Cook Inlet EEZ federal fishery. We also have with us Josh Keaton with the monitoring branch in sustainable fisheries. Doug Duncan, a policy branch chief with Sustainable Fisheries Division. Krista Milani, the in-season branch chief with Sustainable Fisheries Division. And then Verena Gill with Protected Resources Division at National Marine Fisheries Service.
All right, thank
Great
you.
to be here.
All right, appreciate it. So at this time, we're actually going to provide some opportunity for audience to participate after we hear from the Department of Fish and Game as well as NOAA. But at this time, is there anybody who would like to speak prior to that? If so, I'm going to keep you to 3 minutes, and the mic is open. Okay, thank you. So we'll turn it over to staff for staff reports.
Yeah, can you hear me? This is Alex Strawn, Planning Director. I did want to introduce a new face, Maggie Brown. She's a new planner here at the borough, and she's looks like she's going to be working with this board between her and Becca. And so she's a face that you're going to be seeing quite a bit in the future. And then we also have the mayor, who's going to do some recognition on this part of the agenda. Does that sound? Yeah. 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 Now's the time. Yep.
Madam Mayor would be perfect right now.
Yeah. Sure.
I want to do Howard's. Howard, is it easier for me to come up there? Is it easier for me to come up there to be with you or for you to come down? Okay. Or if you want to wait and do it at the end of the meeting so you only have to make one trip, or, okay. Yeah, and Larry as well, but, yeah. Can I just turn this one off so that I don't have to hold it? Yeah, we have presents for you.
Two guys that made this event necessary.
So Howard, this is the first one's for you. Whereas you have demonstrated exceptional dedication and service as a member of the Mat-Su Borough Fish and Wildlife Commission, starting from September 21st, 2010 to December 31st, 2024. So you're not quite over yet, okay? Yeah. Whereas you, as a former Alaska Department of Fish and Game biologist, dedicated 21 years of service to the Alaska Fish and Wildlife and contributed your expertise as a member of this board, and we appreciate that very much. Thank you. And that you have been greatly enriched our board as well as our community with the knowledge that you've had and your willingness to share that knowledge. It doesn't say that here, but I know also you've shared it in the newspaper and many other areas, and we're very thankful for that. It makes our community a much better place to live. And you brought us honor by constantly demonstrating a high level of commitment to us. And so I resolve here as Edna DeVries, the mayor of the borough, to extend to you our sincere appreciation. And as you can see, this is the proclamation on your behalf. And then this is the seal of the borough. the seal, I don't know if everybody can hear, the seal of the borough, as well as a number of people, from assembly people to other people that have worked with you. And so just want to present that to you and say, very small token, but very much appreciated. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Can I make a quick comment?
Sure.
For all of you that wished I never would have been on this commission, you can blame Larry Engel. Larry's the reason I joined when I was approached about becoming a member, because Larry is phenomenal. Everything the mayor said about me, you can go triple for Larry. So, it's true. It's true. A quick story and then I'll shut up. After I got off the Board of Fish in 2010, I was approached by some guys to join the Susitna Valley Fish and Game Advisory Committee. And I said, well, let me think about it. And at about the same time, Bruce Knowles called me and asked if I would be interested in joining what was then known as the Mayor's Blue Ribbon Sportsman's Committee, or some version of that. And I said, well, who's on that? And he said, Larry Engel. I said, I'm on. I'm aboard. If Larry's on there, I'm aboard. So, because Larry brings the science in a way that nobody else could. And I just wanted to tell everybody, because Larry's too shy to say that.
So before I go into this, I have to fully disclose that Larry's wife was my sorority sister back in the 70s. So we go back a day or two also. So whereas you has exemplified also unwavering dedication and service as a member of the Mat-Su Boroughs Fish and Wildlife Commission, faithfully serving from February 20th, 2000 to December 31st, 2024. So again, you have a couple more weeks to be around. So you were a seasoned Alaska Department of Fish and Game fisheries biologist over 30 years to study and manage the Cook Inlet's fish population, and previously served on the Alaska Board of Fisheries from 1994 to 2003, and where you have been an invaluable contribution to our fish and wildlife, addressing complex and contentious issues with professionalism and fairness, consistently applying the sound scientific principles and prioritizing the public's best interest in the management of fish and wildlife. And where your leadership and your steadfast commitment, and I'll just add here, you did say privately to me that you still will be attending some meetings, and if that doesn't happen in the first few months, I shall call you. Before they're resolved that I, as the mayor of the Mat-Su Borough, just appreciate you very much for what you have done. And so here's your proclamation, sir, and also your from the borough, and then
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor. It's been a very rewarding, challenging, and interesting serving on this commission since its inception back in 2007. I've been involved in some way or other with Alaska's fisheries, particularly here in the borough, since I first started to work here as a seasonal in 1960. And I've seen a lot of changes, not just in the community itself, but in the fish and wildlife resources. And those changes are one of the things that have kept me glued to such as this commission. But an important part, I think, of why I've been serving here on this commission for the last 17 to 18 years, whatever it is that the support that we have received from the borough, the various staff members, that have been part of this have really been instrumental in keeping at least me and many of the others involved in this fisheries. It doesn't get any better. And I'm saying that I worked for the state for over 30 years, so I've seen good, bad, and indifferent, and I'm saying this is as good as it gets. So without going on, we've got more important issues than to talk about our past history here. So I get back up on the get back on the stage. Well, okay. Right here.
Madam Mayor, thank you for that recognition. Both Larry and Howard, well deserved. We had a little get together earlier in the month with them, and some of the stories we won't repeat them now, but we appreciate both of you and the contributions not only to during your fishing game careers, but to the Fish and Wildlife Commission. Well done, gentlemen.
Thank you.
So, anything else on staff, Becca? Huh? That's good. All right. So at this time, we will turn it over to the Alaska Department of Fish and Game, and we'll allow them the opportunity to provide us some highlights. And then we will turn it over to Noah, and Noah will do the same, provide highlights, and then we'll have a Q&A session with the commission. And then at that time, after that, we'll ask the public to come up and ask questions as well. Thank you. Go ahead, Matt.
I think Colton's on the agenda first.
Colton, you want to go first?
All right. Sure, I can jump in there.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you for giving us the opportunity to join online. We do appreciate it. So again, I'm Colton Lipka, Upper Cook Inlet Area Management Biologist for Fish and Game. So I'll give you a broad overview of the Cook Inlet commercial fisheries for this year. So the Upper Cook Inlet sockeye salmon total run, which I'm mostly going to be focusing on sockeye, of 6.6 million fish was slightly greater than the forecasted amount of 5.7 million fish, while the harvest of 2 million was actually below average. Now, there's several reasons why harvest can be low. One of the major ones probably contributing to for this year was once again the east side set net fishery was closed due to low abundance of Kenai River king salmon. The ex-vessel value for 2024 was 19.2 million, which is less than the 20-year average of 23 million. Overall abundance trend for sockeye, we did meet or exceed all 5 of the monitored sockeye salmon escapement projects. That'd be Fish Creek and Larson Lake up in the Northern District, and then Cassioff, Kenai River in the Central District, and Packers Creek out on Callaghan Island. The Judd Lake and Chalatna Lake weirs did not operate in 2024 due to funding. And we'll start up in the Northern District as we briefly overview management. The Northern District set net fishery for king salmon, the directed fishery, was closed this year in compliance with the management plan. And the department extended that closure a couple of extra periods into that first week of July as just an abundance of caution. Make sure we got the kings through the district before the fishery went in. And the fishery fished from July 4th to about August 12th. Once we hit the July 20th time period, that's when there are provisions within the management plan that direct the department to restrict the number of nets that are used in that fishery. This year, the department, we used a step-down approach. We started at the least restrictive provision and then walked it down to the most restrictive. And then as we entered August, identifying an issue with coho, we then proceeded with the next periods to reduce time and eventually close that fishery on August 12th, which is pretty early for the Northern District. In the Central District Drift Gillnet fishery, that falls under the Central Drift Gillnet Management Plan. This year was slightly different in that it was the first year that we had the federal fishery taking place out in the middle of the inlet. If you're not familiar with exactly what that area looks like, there are some maps in the season summary, which was included in the meeting packet. And it shows that area south of Callaghan out there in the middle. It's in a kind of a hashed line section. And so that was under federal management. For the state waters, we continued to follow the standard management plan. The regular periods were Mondays and Thursdays. We followed all the provisions within, including the restrictions for, when Drift Gillnet Area 1 was allowed to be used. And kind of to recap the season, most of the time was spent in the corridor areas. So those are the areas that are near the Kenai Peninsula on the east side of the inlet. And the sockeye migration this year, a lot of fish moved into the corridors. So there was a very high harvest that occurred in a fairly short amount of time for corridor periods. We do not see this very frequently, and that did lead to an overall drift harvest that was pretty near their historical average at about 1.6 million sockeye, and quite a few openers. I'm sure folks saw the flow of EOs that came out over the summer. The vast majority of those were for corridor periods. And then once we got into August, the 1% rule, which for those that are not aware, that is the stipulation where if less than 1% of the total sockeye catch is caught for 2 consecutive periods, then the drift fleet will then be restricted to areas 3 and 4, which are over on the west side of Cook Inlet. And with the implementation of the federal fishery, those become some pretty narrow bands over along the coast over there, at least on the southern end. 1% rule does not kick in very often, but this year, the sockeye run, along with it being fairly concentrated on the east side of the inlet, also was on an earlier time, and those fish, they came through pretty hot and heavy, and then they rolled off pretty quickly once we got through the end of July into that first week of August. And let's see. So for just some more of the harvest related metrics here, the overall Upper Cook Inlet harvest of 2 million, that consisted of 1.8 sockeye, 24,750 coho, 41,679 pinks, 73,905 chum. For pinks, that's a pretty low number for an even year. For chum, that is also a pretty low number. The one chum escapement goal we do have, which is over in Susitna Bay in the southwest corner of the inlet, that is a real survey goal that did not achieve the SCG that is established there. And what that results in is, for the Susitna Bay sub-district, it is open for set gillnet, and it can only be open for drift gillnet once we've established that that escapement goal is going to be met through that aerial survey. So that did not open for drift gillnet fishing this year. And then that coho number, that is a very low coho harvest number, reflecting the low abundance and then also the management restrictions that we put in place. I guess also notable, with the upper sub-district east side set net fishery not taking place, this was the first year of the commercial dip net fishery in place of that set net fishery. That provision was put in by the Board of Fish as part of the Kenai River Late Run King Salmon Action Plan. So folks that had registered to fish with set gill nets in the upper sub-district, instead of set gill net, they had the opportunity to use dip net. We'll call it mixed results for how that went. Fish were harvested. They took 27,730 sockeye, 21 coho, 134 pinks, and 21 chum. they kind of take away from that is it worked in certain places at certain times, is the best way that I could put it. And and also we did not have the offshore test fishery this year, so that was another unique situation. But I think that's about all I got there.
Thank you, Colton. We'll save questions until we go through sport fish and then Noah. So, Matt?
All right, I'll start with a summary that's in your packet, but I'll just do the highlights in case you didn't have time to read. I'll just give a quick update from that summary that's included in your packet information. I'll start with king salmon, just a brief overview. The only fishing opportunity for king salmon this year for sport fish anglers was the Eklutna tail race, their stocked fishery. Everything else started closed. All of northern Cook Inlet started closed for king salmon, all of Knik Arms stream, which would be the Little Susitna, and then West Cook Inlet. With that, we did have a record low forecast on the Dushka last season of 6,600 fish, and it missed the BEG of 9,000 to 18,000 king salmon despite the fishery remaining closed through the season. The final count was 3,440 Chinook salmon, considered a historic low count. Little Sioux king salmon sport fishery was closed through the season. The weir count of 1,014 fish was incomplete due to flooding events. However, all indices suggested the goal would not have been achieved. And then moving towards the Talkeetna, East and Yetna king stock goals, they're pending analysis but likely missed again in 2024. Postseason aerial counts over individual streams that contribute to these stock goals, abundance estimates all came in low, and in some cases historically low. And then moving on to our miscellaneous stocks, individual goals on the Chwitna and the Theodore and West Cook Inlet were missed. The Chulitna River escapement goal was missed, and Alexander Creek was missed with a count of only 51 king salmon. Moving on to sockeye, it's more of a positive note. Fish Creek personal use dip net fishery was opened by emergency order on July 20, allowing for a 12-day fishery, a few more days than average. Positive dip netting reports combined with strong sockeye counts going into and out of the fishery, around 43,800 sockeye were harvested for locals participating in that fishery. I have not seen a number that high for harvest. The escapement goal was made with 37,939 sockeye near the top end of the goal. The sport fishery was also allowed 7 days a week. That's per new regulation before and after the personal use fishery. Larson Creek, as Colton covered, was off to a low start for the sport fishery with low water conditions. So we had positive fishing reports, and the final count there was 16,133 within the escapement goal. And then the Susitna personal use fishery, this is the 5th year of that fishery. It remains a low effort fishery because of its remote. Anglers that participated reported poor fishing success for sockeye and coho mid to late July. 7 days were fished in 2024. Preliminary harvest estimates of all species was around 6,300 fish, and sockeye predominantly the harvested species in that mixed fishery. And moving on to coho salmon, we operate all weirs, Dushka, Jim Creek, Fish Creek, and Little Sioux for the full coho season. Unfortunately, large-scale flooding resulted in losing the count at 2 of our big weirs, Dushka and Little Sioux. But we did get complete counts on Jim Creek and Fish Creek. On the coho weir on the Dushka, flooded early in the season, right around 40% through our coho run, and prior to the flood, counts were historically low. So this, combined with low fishing success and other indices of a weak run, prompted restricting bait, 1 fish bag limit on August 6, and closing the Susitna to coho fishing on August 15, and reducing, we remain closed. Sorry for all that. Final count on the Dushka was 1,817. That was incomplete, and likely the SEG was not achieved. The Little Sioux coho weir weir counts were favorable and produced a good upward trend, which drastically trailed off by the first quartile of the run on August 6. Heavy rains led to high water events and a lost weir count for 18 days. An emergency order was issued prohibiting the use of bait, followed by the closure of the sport fishery to retention of coho. The count of 964 was incomplete, but likely missed the escapement goal. Jim Creek, like other systems, weak counts eventually resulted in closure of the sport fishery at Jim. The final count was 1,396 coho. The escapement goal on this system is not based on the weir, but on a postseason foot survey of McRoberts Creek. The goal there was made with 376 coho counted within the goal range, and it was the only achieved goal in the Mat-Su for coho. Fish Creek Weir week runs of coho led to the closure of Fish Creek as well. The final count there was only 235 fish, below the SEG of 1,200. And that concludes my statements. I did want to say thank you to Howard and Larry for your continued service within this commission. It's been really nice working with you.
Thank you. And at this time, Adam, I will turn it over to you, please, with Noah.
Yeah, great. Thanks. Let me just share my screen for our presentation here real quick. I can't see you guys at all. Just let me know if you can't see the screen, something's not showing up correctly.
It's coming around very clearly.
Okay, great. Thanks. Yeah, thank you for the invite and the opportunity to present some of our information here today. I just wanted to point out that this is the first federal in-season salmon management report since Alaska statehood, so we really appreciate the opportunity. A couple things that we will not be able to present on tonight, given the time restraints, are just some of the federal conservation measures, the harvest spec setting process, as well as the status determination criteria that we use to that we look at for all of these stocks. However, all this information, as well as things like the salmon fisheries management plan, the stock assessment and fishery evaluation reports, and the small entity guide. And the small entity guide is basically like a good summary of how we manage the inlet EEZ salmon fishery. All that information can be found at the bottom link on here on this title slide. So moving into it, this is where the federal Cook Inlet EEZ salmon fishery occurs inside of this hashed polygon here. So kind of like Colton was pointing out, it's kind of in the middle of the inlet there. Those boundaries are set by the 3-mile limits of state waters. So how do we manage the Cook Inlet EEZ fishery? The season typically begins on the first, on or after the third Monday in June or June 19th, whichever is later. And in 2024,
Adam, do you want to roll your slides, please?
Maybe you can't see it. I am on the second one. Maybe can you see the map?
No, we cannot.
I wonder if it's on.
Yes. Okay, let me just stop sharing real quick.
So Adam, we have your opening slide, and then on the left, we have all your other slides, but as you go through your presentation, the opening slide does not change.
How about I try and change it from there without going into presenter? Let me know if it changes for you. I can just click the next slide. Yeah. Can you see that change?
Yes, we got that.
Okay, okay, let's just stick with that then instead of messing around too much more. Okay, sorry, so I'll kind of try and get back into this and reorient everyone to this. So this is a map just showing where the federal Cook Inlet EEZ area sits inside of that polygon. And that's kind of bordered by the 3-mile limit of state waters there. So it just kind of sits right in the middle of Cook Inlet. So as far as management of the Cook Inlet fishery goes, season begins on or after the third Monday in June or June 19th, whichever is later. And in 2024, this started on Thursday, June 20th, and that will be the same opener for 2025. From the opener from June 20th up until July 15th, the fishery is open on Mondays and Thursdays for a 12-hour period from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And then from July 16th to July 31st, that fishery is reduced to one-day 12-hour openers on Thursdays. And the main reason for this is to allow extra passage for coho through that area to allow for additional escapement. And then from August 1st to August 15th, it reopens to two-day openers for those 12-hour periods. So kind of the day-to-day for management for us, with all the staff here in the Alaska Regional Office, as well as law enforcement, we're having weekly meetings and looking at the harvests that are being reported through e-landings, as well as looking at VMS data for what's going on in those fisheries. And depending on how active the fishery is, we may have more than once weekly meetings just to kind of keep tabs on what's going on there. And how NIPS functions with publishing actions, whether that's a fishery closure or open or some other change, we have to publish our actions in the Federal Register. And these require anywhere between 1 to 4 business days. And unlike how the state works, we do not have the ability to do emergency orders on very short notice. So the federal process requires those extra days. So most of the actions that we're going to publish in the Federal Register are something like a fishery closure or an announcement of the opener. But as far as the closures go, what we're looking at is the total allowable catch, and if that is about to be reached, we would do an action. Or if there's data indicating that there's a run failure and continued fishing may lead to something like overfishing on a particular salmon stock. And if it's not either of those things, then the fishery is going to close by regulation on August 15th, which is what we did in 2024. So taking a kind of a broad look at what the 2024 season looked like, we had about 206 vessels participating, and that generated approximately 965 fish tickets for the season. So in this table here, you can see the total allowable catches, what the 2024 catch was, and what percent of the TAC was caught for a particular species. So obviously in Cook Inlet, the primary target species is sockeye. We saw about 66% of the total TAC achieved for that species, and lesser amounts for the other species. And certainly with coho and chinook, we already heard, and with bank, we kind of heard how those were some lower runs this year. Taking a look at vessel participation by opening date on your primary vertical axis, you have vessel count, and those are unique vessels. And then on the x-axis there, you have the opener date, so just the days that the fishery was open. What you can see here is just the fishery slowly ramped up, and there was the most effort occurring between July 8th and the July 15th openers. And shortly after that 15th opener, or right after that July 15th opener, things dropped pretty steadily as far as effort. And kind of like we were hearing Colton talk about, a lot of those sockeye moved closer into state waters, and they were kind of bordering on that east side of the EEZ boundary. So what this table is showing is both federal and state catch. So in that first column in the table there, you're just seeing that federal catch that we saw a couple slides before. In the middle column, what you're seeing is both the state and the federal catch from Upper Cook Inlet for drift gillnet only. And then the last column there is showing the proportion of the catch that was estimated to have come out of the EEZ. So it was about 20% of the total sockeye catch was estimated to have come out of the EEZ. And then for some of the other species like chum, coho, and chinook, those percentages are quite a bit bigger, but you'll notice that the harvests are actually quite a bit smaller. So, proportionally they look bigger, but by fish, it's a much smaller catch than sockeye. So the next series of slides, I'm going to kind of walk us through a few different graphs. So I'm just going to take a moment to orient us to those. So what this is showing is our sockeye harvest, and on the axis to your left is the daily harvest and number of fish. So that's just showing the sum of catch per day, and that's represented by the green line. The axis to your right is showing the cumulative harvest and the number of fish, and that's represented by the black line. And the x-axis is opener date, so just the date that the fisheries were open. So you can see with sockeye, and this includes Kenai late run and Castile and aggregate other stocks, that effort, kind of slowly picked up, and then July 15th was when we caught the majority of fish during the season. And that was about 93,000 sockeye caught during this one opener. And then after that, it quickly drops and just kind of tapers off for the rest of the season. So a really defined peak in effort and catch for sockeye. And moving on to chum here, same style graph. You can see that chum harvest was kind of spread more throughout the season. So kind of starting right at the beginning of July and going into the beginning of August, and then just kind of flatlining throughout the rest of the season. So a little bit more spread out. And then with pink salmon, it's a fairly compressed harvest. Huge catch on July 15th, drops off again. Then we see a little uptick in it again, and then it stays at a pretty low level throughout the remainder of the season. But pink salmon was overall a fairly low harvest for the year. And co-host, the co-host summary here shows it was pretty slow start to that season, but you can see the majority of that catch is happening on one day, and that's bracketed by the July 16th to August 1st reduction in fishery opening. So this is when the fishery was only open 1 day a week for that 12-hour period. And pretty much, 90-ish% of all the coho harvested for the season came from this July 25th day for about 2,400 fish overall. And then moving into Chinook here, just a note that, these are not in hundreds or tens of thousands or anything. These are just individual fish on these vertical axes. So a third of our Chinook harvest all occurred were reported on one day on the July 11th opener. Otherwise, it was pretty minimal harvest there. The July 18th and 25th line there just shows that there was actually zero harvest reported on those days, and the last reported harvested Chinook was on August 1st. So pretty minimal in there, but the TAC for the species is about 240, and it's only 31 harvested for the whole season. Just some acknowledgements. We really want to thank all the vessels and processors that kind of helped and worked with us along the way as we got this fishery up and going. It's always hard when you do a new thing, and it just, it was nice to see the fishery get up and off the ground and people participating in it. And then certainly all the staff and all the different divisions that helped move this along and helped in season to keep a track of this fishery when it's something new. And then just here's some contacts for individuals that work on this fishery throughout the season. And I will say in the link I provided on the first slide, if you follow that to the bottom, it has phone numbers and emails for other people as well. So with that, I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam, for that presentation. I think it would be wise at this time to hear from the public first, and then the Fish and Wildlife Commission can have a dialogue with both NOAA and the state. So at this time, I'll open up the podium here first, then we'll go online, and we'll give you an opportunity to comment, and I'll try to hold you to 3 minutes. So anybody in the audience would like to come up? Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Just following on that brief presentation, I wanted to read an announcement. I was asked to read a statement from the commissioner. The department does not support NOAA Fisheries Cook Inlet EEZ salmon stock groups or the associated analysis because they are inconsistent with the state salmon management principles. For the same reason, we do not support NOAA Fisheries' establishment of total allowable catches to manage harvest in the federal Cook Inlet EEZ area salmon fishery. Thanks.
And that's from the commissioner, correct, Matt?
That's correct.
Thank you. Okay, public, please. Anybody in the audience? Okay, at this time, we'll go to people online. Becca, is there anybody who would like to speak? Please raise your hand online.
It does not appear anybody online has raised their hand.
Okay, I don't see anybody online, even though we have a lot of people there that would like to comment. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to the commission. Larry?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to start this conversation by thanking the department for these very excellent reports. You've got the highlights. We just heard some of those, and you just heard from Noah, and it takes quite a bit of time to put together a package like this for a whole season, and I very much appreciate it. And for those in the public that have not had access to this, you can go to the Borough website where the commission's agenda is set up and make a copy of it so you so choose. And before we go further, I'd also like to request from Noah a copy of all those tables and slides they just showed us. We whipped through them real quick. It's a good summary of information from the first year of the EEZ. So if at all possible, I'd like to get copies of those sent to the commission. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Larry. And Becca actually, during Adam's presentation, sent an email and made that request, so we will be getting it. So thank you. So commissioners, let's start with a dialogue, both with the state and Noah. Howard.
Well, might as well start things off with a bang here. Yeah. My wrists are delicate with your handcuffs and stuff. One of the questions, well, the only question I really submitted was, I know that in the Department of Fish and Game, the Commercial Fisheries Division and the Sport Fish Division during the season in Cook Inlet meet daily or at least weekly to discuss what's going on, how the runs are progressing, any potential actions that need to be taken in the future. I asked, my question to them was, how often do they meet with the NOAA people to coordinate between the federal and the state? And the answer that I got back from Fish and Game was they do not meet with the federal people on the management. That to me is kind of hard to understand when you have two different agencies managing the same resource. Granted, their methods are different, but you would think they would at least want to touch base to see what the other one's thinking or doing. To me, that would be logical. And I noticed in Noah's presentation on the one slide, they commented that their, the NW Fishery Service, they meet at least weekly between their managers and their law enforcement people. How hard would it be to allow Fish and Game to at least sit in and listen, maybe contribute, answer questions if there's some misunderstanding, especially on the enforcement side, about what's going on? It just seems to me like there should be better communication between the two managing agencies. And I realize this is a new program, so it's probably going to take a while to work all the bugs out, but that to me makes sense, is that the state people and the federal people should at least be talking to each other, may not decide anything in particular, but at least one side knows what the other side's thinking and doing. And now the handcuff question. At the last Board of Fish meeting, there was an agenda change request submitted by this body asking for a status for, I'm losing all my words now. Yeah, stock of harvest concern, I believe it was, for king salmon, Chinook salmon, and the Susitna drainage. And I talked a little bit about it with the sport fish director, and he said all the answers are in the department comments. So I went and looked at the department comments, and no, it was not a problem with the regulation. It was not an unforeseen instance. But the part that really threw me is where the department said there was no conservation issue as part of the comments on the ACR. And that's even in light of all of the information that was provided in the ACR showing about the decline of something over 99% of the harvest of king salmon in the fisheries now, if there even is any, versus 15, 20 years ago with the standards. And I'm a little bit confused, and I would appreciate it if somebody with Fish and Game can explain to me the logic that the department used to decide that there was no conservation issue with Chinook salmon in the Susitna drainage.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'll take that one.
Go ahead, Matt.
Well, I'll try to take that one. Thanks, Howard. It's a good question. I know it's an important one, especially to the commission, the folks that submit those. The short answer is the department didn't support that or recommend that it be adopted as an ACR because it didn't meet the criteria. And there's a couple of things at play here. The way the process is set up right now is that the department, the year of a board cycle, so in this case, we're talking about the Northern Cook Inlet, the Upper Cook Inlet meeting, goes through all of the data, reviews the escapement goals, and determines at that point if there's any new stocks of concern for the area or if any of the stocks of concerns that exist need changing or editing. That process happens every 3 years prior to the board meeting for that. As folks usually know, I think the board addresses issues in each area on a 3-year cycle. At the time, last year at the Upper Cook Inlet meeting, those stocks did not meet the criteria for stock of concern. And I think that's in the staff comments. I drafted those, but if it's not, I can certainly go through that with you later. I don't have that information with me to tell you at the meetings that we had why we didn't think that it met stock of concern. Typically, it's meeting the escapement goals 4 out of 5 years. So if there's a couple of years there where it didn't meet it even by a little, it's probably not going to get the recommendation for stock of concern. The other thing about that is the board has not accepted, although there was a discussion about it at the work session, ACRs are proposals from the public to create a stock of concern. It's not a regulatory change. The regulatory change comes in the action plan that's created once there's a stock of concern. So there is place for public input, but it's not in specifically submitting proposals to recommend stocks of concern. If at the work session the department says we recognize and recommend this stock and this stock be a stock of concern, and members of the public disagree with that or want to know how come they didn't consider this one or why this one doesn't, there's room for that discussion. And it can happen directly with the department, or it can happen by the public contacting board members and saying, during the work session, I would like on the record a discussion of why this didn't meet the criteria. So that's the first part of my answer. The second part is, it was an ACR, so it was asking for a stock of concern to be brought up and designated outside that area's meeting cycle. I don't think that's happened before. The ACR criteria for taking something up outside of the cycle is very high. Otherwise, there would be Upper Cook Inlet meetings every single year. And for a lot of reasons, the department and the board and the public have decided that's not what they want to do. And the last thing I would say on that is that just because it doesn't have the stock of concern designation or didn't qualify from the department's recommendation at the Upper Cook Inlet meeting last year, it could certainly at the next meeting in 2 more years. In the meanwhile, the department is going to continue managing. We're aware of the concerns for it. So just because it doesn't have the stock of concern designation doesn't mean that, and I forgot exactly how you'd worded that, but I would say if that's in that staff comment, that's inaccurate. It's not that the department doesn't recognize that there's a concern with that stock or an issue. It just means it didn't meet the criteria, and the department's going to continue to manage that with emergency order authority to take those necessary restrictions and closures on there until it can come before the board and get the full public input on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Okay, one follow-up, Howard.
You're limiting me. I understand the procedural part to an extent, except when I was on the Board of Fish in 2008, almost my first meeting for the Upper Cook Inlet situation. This body, then known as the Mayor's Blue Ribbon Sportsman's Committee, or whatever it was called, during the Upper Cook Inlet meeting, brought up the problem with the Susitna sockeyes and voiced a loud concern that there should be a stock of concern declared. And this, as far as I know, this happened literally at this meeting. It wasn't a lot of lead up to it. And the department disagreed and said, no, it's not appropriate. The board turned around and voted it in anyhow and said it was a stock of concern. And those numbers for those sockeye were bad then, but they were a whole lot better than what the king numbers are now for the Chinook. And that's kind of the precedent that I was looking at, and why I was literally surprised when I saw that, is there any conservation concern in the write-up? And it said no, very clearly. And then our follow-up concern on some of that is we actually, in commenting to the feds about their studies to declare Gulf of Alaska Chinook as threatened and endangered, we actually asked them to give the state time to be able to deal with the issue. And we were thinking that ACR would probably be a major step in the direction of the state starting to deal with the issue. And the fact that it was not accepted and is a dead issue at this point in the state, I really don't know where the feds are, but I wouldn't be surprised that they ultimately end up categorizing the Chinook as either threatened or endangered, and that's going to devastate a whole lot of people if it's endangered. So I'll just stop there. And thank you for your answer.
Thank you, Howard. Others? Jim?
Yes, I'd like a very brief follow-up to that, and thank you very much, Matt, for your answers. So the reason that we filed this ACR when we did is, as you well know, the circumstances are dire, and I am sure the department understands that. So what should we have done if we wanted to get it on the docket and have an earlier discussion before we got to Cook Inlet? I take your point that Cook Inlet could be a thing every year if everybody did that, but we thought that this was something that was exceptional and not something that's just popping up all the time.
Matt, please.
Is it? Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. With stocks of concern aren't like the general proposal process to submit them. So the question is, what could this body have done to bring that before? I guess my answer would be on that would be talk to the department and find out why it didn't meet stock of concern criteria the year before at the Upper Cook Inlet meeting. And then probably go directly to board members. As Mr. Delo had said, I mean, they can put on their schedule whatever they want and try and persuade board members that this is an emergency, that it can't wait, and it does meet the criteria to be moved up out of cycle. I think that's probably the way I'd recommend.
Thank you.
Matt, if I may, I got, we saw how 2024 turned out both with Chinook and Coho. We do have the emergency order authority. How do you anticipate, particularly with Coho, how do you anticipate starting that season with fisheries, Little Sioux, Deshka, et cetera?
All right, we just had a recent discussion on this, so everything's preliminary. We met as Cook Inlet area management staff, so Homer all the way up. And we had these discussions. They need to be finalized and run through the commissioner's office, but we'll use every indication, watching the commercial fish catches, comparing it to last year, and watching these fish come through the inlet, and we're going to be very, very conservative and probably move quickly with management actions out of the gate for Coho. It was very alarming to see those low numbers of harvest, and without the offshore test fishery, that leaves us with basically commercial catches out of the gate to analyze what's happening with Coho in the central district. So we're going to be conservative. We'll watch our numbers at our weirs. We have funding for the weirs. We'll watch Deshka, Little Susitna Weir, Jim Creek and Fish Creek for indications of what is moving north. And then, based off of our projections and what we're seeing, we'll take action early in the sport fishery and maybe start with a one fish bag or, take step down measures to decrease harvest. One fish bag limit would cut harvest in half. Pulling bait early would also reduce harvest. We don't know if we're going to come out that way because we can't predict what's going to come back for coho. We can forecast Chinook, but we can't forecast coho. So we'll wait and see what happens, and we'll move quickly if we see that there's a concern similar to last season.
I appreciate that. So the key to me, putting on my old manager's hat, is the test fishery. Colton, is the test fishery going to happen next year?
That's a great question. At this point, I do not have funding for it, so the answer would be no, unless funding is provided. I am aware of a couple of entities out there that are looking into options for helping the department with that, but then otherwise we will need to wait for a legislative appropriation to increase our budget to run the offshore test fishery.
Thank you, Colton. And approximately what's the test fishery run annually for cost?
So last legislative cycle, we had requested 150,000. So I'm assuming it'd be in that same ballpark.
Thank you. Other commission members?
Hey, Pete, this is Andy. Can I speak up?
Well, I don't know. You're in Hawaii. I don't think that's fair. Go ahead, Andy.
So this question is for Colton about that test fishery. In the past, you told me that the coho numbers from the test fishery were only relatable to the Deshka River. Would that test fishery, the coho numbers there, would they be usable throughout the rest of northern Cook Inlet? Or would they only be related to the Deshka River?
A good question, Andy. I think so. What you're relaying there is when we have looked at correlations between the offshore test fish coho index, it had some correlation to the Deshka River weir, which would be the longer data set of complete data that we have. One way that you could look at it would be if you take that overall index and either compare it to itself, that can tell you some of what the rest of the inlet may experience, but it is a bit of a loose relationship because that test fishery only runs through the end of July. If that's going to apply to the remainder of the northern district, I'm getting a little bit into speculation. So we'd either have to keep it towards just where we have seen some correlation between OTF and Deshka, or we could speak about it more broadly in just a more of presence, relative abundance, overall Cook Inlet, right? No longer relatable to where that test fishery is and the operating time that it's in the water.
So I'm going to ask a little bit further here. How is that relationship to Little Susitna River weir? Little Susitna weir has been in place longer than the Deshka, considerably longer with the coho goal attached to it. Oftentimes, the entry into Little Sioux can be similar as far as early as the Deshka.
Great question, Eddie. I don't know the answer. I'm going to phone a friend. So, Kyle, if you're still on.
Yep.
Have you taken a look at any relationship between Little Sioux and OTF?
Yeah, Little Sioux and OTF have no relationship. So typically how that analysis has been done is we look at the cumulative CPV of the OTF and look at different temporal periods for the OTF and how that relates to the escapement goal or the success of the meeting this escapement goals. And across all temporal periods, we see no relationship with that and Little Susitna, but we only see the relationship essentially by June 30th at really high CPUEs for Coho, where we then are able to kind of see some probability of achieving the lower bound or the upper bound of those goals. So more concisely, the utility of using OTF for judging Coho, the probability of achieving Coho goals, is not very good. It's not a good tool. We are currently looking into other means to try to assess that situation a little bit better.
Could you please send us those numbers that indicate we are likely to achieve or exceed those Coho escapement goals, please?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm done.
Matt, please, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Just to follow up real briefly on what Samantha was saying, to give you guys a glimpse into the workings at the department. So, as she said, we just had a Cook Inlet staff meeting with Sportfish, and we laid out some options about preseason actions that we might take. We started talking about Kings, of course. We're talking about Coho. So where we are in that is we talked about options. And kind of one of the things that we're struggling with right now is ties back to the question that Andy just asked. So 1 or 2 bad Coho years don't worry me too much, but we've had several of them in a row. And so that starts raising that flag a little bit higher. So what we're struggling with right now, we're trying to weigh out is, do we start out conservatively and let folks have an idea of what's coming and send a message that we're taking this seriously by doing something preseason? Or do we wait and see if there's any information that we can get in season in order to help inform that decision? And we started talking with Colton and Kyle and the team down there to see what we might use as an in-season indicator of information for coho salmon. And the OTF right now, I don't think is coming up as our real solid indicator. Because of the run timing in these Northern Cook Inlet streams, we can use Northern Cook Inlet probably as an indicator of what we can expect to see down in Lower Cook Inlet, because those coho come in much later, but that doesn't do y'all much good. So we're kind of looking at that right now. And at the point, we just had our Sportfish Cook Inlet discussion. We need to take up the options that we have to our headquarters. And then once we get an idea of how headquarters wants to move on it, we'll take it up to the commissioner's level and discuss with Comfish so that we come out with a department position on that. So we're starting that discussion and weighing the options, and those are some of the things that we're looking at and thinking about. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim?
Just a quick follow-up question, if I might, Matt. It seems like we have a paucity of data. In fact, no data really until the end of the season here. And I know there was a big fish monitoring project that was done by radar in the Kuskokwim River, I believe it was. And we learned at the last Board of Fish meeting that silt is not apparently a problem for counting fish with radar. And so should we be moving in that direction to put measurements for specific species in some of our rivers?
Yeah, we're using sonar, or at least exploring it more and more. If you're not aware, we have a sonar program at Lake Creek, but that's a small, shallow, fast-moving, clear stream, and it's too bouldery to put a weir in. So I would say if you look from best to worst, the best is a weir, because we can literally count every fish that comes back. Not only that, we can get our hands on them, we can scoop them out of the box, we can sample them so we can get age compositions, we can get age, sex, length data. Sonar, we've looked at using it, for example, in the lower Yetna River, and it is too wide and the bottom is too wonky, would be the scientific term. To where you get like dead spots, right? There's shadows. You see if there's a hill, it doesn't look on the other side of it. I'm not aware of the Kuskokwim. Maybe they have a better profile on the bottom, but Cook Inlet's pretty problematic with the really high tides and everything. So yeah, that's true. Sonar will, the silt won't affect it. But what we've looked into it on the, like say in the Susitna, it doesn't work very well.
Well, that leads me into a question. Recognizing that we've had problems with the Little Sioux and Deshka's high water events, and back in my younger days, we had that same, not with weirs, but just remember high water events. How hard has the department looked at sonar for Little Sioux and Deshka?
We're all over it. So that's the plan for this season. We're going to move camp, the field camp for the Little Sioux upriver a few miles. We found a spot that during major flooding events is only 5 feet deep versus where we're at right now. It's bank to bank. It's just a dangerous scenario to put your staff in when you have flooding events. So we're going to move the field camp. We'll test out this new site. We should have the weir installed for coho. In the meantime, Nick's going to run sonar as a feasibility on Little Sioux to see how that works. So we've got a plan in place to start using sonar on Little Sioux to see if that's something that's going to generate a greater count. Fortunately, we still have an aerial escapement goal for Little Sioux, so that'll be a priority for our flights. And we'll take a look at Little Sioux from the air. And what's nice about that, like we do on Lake Creek, we can have a sonar count that we can also compare with aerial survey data. So we'll still get our king salmon escapement information, but we have a plan to proceed forward to sonar on Little Sioux and see what we can learn from that project and see if that's going to be a better way to measure because of all these high water events. And fortunately, I'm loving this weather, just moving into next spring. Maybe we won't have the runoff issues like we've had the past few years, which should make this project even better. So that's our plan moving forward for 2025.
I'm usually never at a loss for words. In light of the fact that the Chinook salmon recovery is realistically, in my opinion, probably 10 years away, maybe longer, I'll be an old man by then. And the coho is unpredictable. You can't really say for sure how strong next year or the year after or whatever it's going to be. Has the department looked into the idea of increasing production at the hatcheries to increase stocking for stock lake fishing to provide people opportunities to at least still go fishing in the borough? And I'm going to throw northern pike in there too. Is the department looking at trying to promote that even more than they have? Because northern pike, I'm not an upper Midwest kid, but northern pike is a fun fish to catch, and it is a good eating fish. So what steps are the department taking to try and still provide reasonable fishing access to people in the borough?
That's a good question, Howard. And it's both personal and professional for me. So Oliver is going to be your new stocking coordinator as my new assistant. And we go to bat at that hatchery in our area meetings. I'm always fighting for more fish for the Mat-Su. And we get the greater portion of fish from that hatchery allotment out here in the Mat-Su. We have the most aggressive lake stocking program in South Central, and we're proud of that. You can drive in any direction. There's almost 100 stock lakes. We're just under, I think, 90, and we're always looking to add to that program. The problem is with growing that program, there's only so much rearing capacity, and right now with coho, we were short on our egg takes, and same thing with Chinook. So our stocking levels for Chinook at Eklutna, we won't have the catchables for our lake programs for the winter. We explored catchable cohos. They didn't really go over very well. That might be something that we pursue in the future. But this year, because of our low egg take for cohos, our fingerling program was in jeopardy. So in lieu of stocking the catchables, we wanted to keep that fingerling program going because they actually produce a pretty decent winter fishery. It takes a few years from their small size moving forward. I think it would be good to hear from Parker on what's happening with northern pike, in particular Finger Lake, which might, we were just informed, and Parker verified that we do have northern pike in Finger Lake now, which presents a huge problem for the stocking program and the future of that lake. Since we put so many fingerling out there, we need to wrap our heads around how this pike population is, progressing into the future and what we might do to mediate the northern pike. But I'll let Parker speak to that.
Yeah, that's a kind of a bit of a complex one, because on one hand, we want people to catch and remove pike, and then we also want to provide opportunity for fishing as well too, right? We don't manage it as pike as an opportunity to be there for people to fish. I mean, we're out there every single day killing pike where people are trying to fish for pike, right? But we want them to fish for them to remove them from the system, kind of, if that makes sense. So it's kind of complicated, and we've done our best, through the board process to liberalize the regulations as much as we can to provide more opportunity, increasing the amount of lakes that people can use 5 lines on for the ice, lets them harvest more, no limit, no season. There's plenty of opportunities out there, for people for pike, and, we promote it on one hand, but it's kind of a double-edged sword because, we want them to fish them out of existence in an ideal world, right? If that makes sense.
Thank you. Colton, I got a question for you. Recognizing the processing capacity challenges we had in 2024, were any of the fishing periods affected by processing capacity?
No, not that I'm aware. It was definitely a challenge for the shore-based processors down here in the central lower peninsula. This is one of the knock-on effects of not having OTF, turns out, as the processors had watched that closely like the rest of us to help prepare for their staffing and ability to handle the amount of fish that came in. And so with this year, the way the fish moved in, large numbers and pretty quick succession and fairly frequent emergency orders, they definitely got slammed pretty good. But as far as I know, they did keep up and they were able to keep staff on. Of course, we kept rolling out the openers based off the surplus of sockeye abundance that we were able to assess. But I definitely heard a little bit of woes from the processors, but that was all.
Okay, thank you. Others, please. Larry.
One of the issues that bothered our commission a bit this last year was that we had previously worked hard to secure research funding for a couple of major projects here in the Mat-Su, and the funding came available, and one of them was Gelatina Lake Weir, which is one of the more important measuring tools for sockeye, the biggest one we have for the Susitna River. We got funding to operate that weir, which has been unoperated for several years now. And unfortunately, the Fish and Game couldn't find staff to run the weir. Is that going to be a problem in the future? And the reason I ask this is really important that when we work hard with our legislators and they work hard in their job to secure this funding, and then we don't do what we said was a priority project. So we need to have a better understanding on this type of issue.
Colton?
Yeah, I'll jump in there. So this last year, a lot of that has to do with timing of when we actually find out that we have funding. So in this case, it's late May, mid-May, when we actually find out that funding's approved. And so then when you're looking at a project like Gelatina that has been not operated since 2018, maybe, don't hold me to that date. We don't know the status of camp. We don't know what's there, what's not there. We still need to hire people. It just did not work out. Now, we did put staff on it, and they did take a trip out to go assess the camp and the situation. Take away from that is there's a whole lot left up there. What was left at camp has been pretty well pilfered and used otherwise. So we're looking at a fairly stout rebuild of that camp to get it up and running. And so We're moving forward with our budget project priorities. A lot of it does come down to staffing and funding. If we got the funding, we still need the staffing, and I'm sure folks are aware it's the trend has continued that we are struggling with staffing. Whether it be seasonals or biologist positions, folks rotating, folks are going and doing other things. So we are putting our best efforts forth to make those things happen, but sometimes it just doesn't work out. But for at least going forward, it's the plan, and we will see how it goes with all the staff changeover that's coming. I would open this one up, Kyle or Anna, if you had anything you wanted to add on that particular topic.
No, I think you pretty much nailed it. Yeah, as Colton had mentioned, the last several years we've been confronted with a lot of staffing issues, especially for seasonal staff. And the timing of funding is oftentimes presents a lot of challenges that we can almost not overcome. And especially this year will be no exception to that. We're going to be seeing some pretty considerable staffing changes, trying to bring in new staff, fill some pretty big roles. But the plan going forward is we're going to try to get it off the ground, but again, probably won't know until June.
So the answer to that question is we don't know if we're going to use that staffing for that important research project next year. A follow-up question, again, about research, Mr. Chairman. Another project that we got secured funding through the legislature with last year was the coho genetics study for Cook Inlet. And we've had about 3 years of coho study in the past, and that's very important to have that kind of information, to get it, and particularly becoming even more important now that our coho runs are not doing very well. One of the questions we asked the department, that's part of our booklet, we're going to respond to in a few minutes, is how are we progressing on that project for next year? And there's a lot of uncertainty there. It seemed like, are we going to, my question is, are we going to have a coho genetic project next year?
Yeah, that's a great question. We will definitely have a coho genetics project implemented next year. The cornerstone to Upper Cook Inlet research is catch and escapement sampling, and implementing a coho genetics component to our overall program will be a lot easier than getting another weir up off the ground. We're currently in the process of generating sampling goals for that. So in the coming months, we'll have a little bit better idea of what temporal resolution we can potentially get from those GSI estimates. So yeah, we do plan on running that project this year.
Well, thank you. Again, I'd like to emphasize why I put this question forward, is that when we go to you folks and get priority research needs, like we already talked a little bit today about the Anchor Point test fishery, how important that is, and that there's no lacking of funding. If we were to get that funding and then we come up and find out we don't have staffing, it's going to be hard for us to get that kind of help from the legislature in the future when we have these kind of projects that don't materialize. So do your best in staffing and getting moving when you get money from the legislature like this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Larry. Gabe?
Yeah, I'm just kind of curious, going back to Chalatenna, if it was the case that the funding was allocated for that weir, it was a lack of personnel, and then after looking into the weir itself in the camp, and it was the case that it needed material to rebuild it again, was some of that funding that we pushed so hard to get for you guys utilized to get that material or procure that material for the following year if the funding's there?
Kyle?
So we did use some of that funding this year in order to go out and actually assess the site and see what materials we may need. And yes, there was the startup component. There was a startup component to the overall funding that was provided with this project, and that would be used to acquire additional materials for that project.
Okay, thank you. And is it next year that Chalatenna is scheduled to be funded, or is it not?
As it is right now, it seems like it is supposed to be funded next year. But again, nothing's really finalized until June.
Okay, thank you.
So Kyle, this is Pete. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit more. The Chalatenna River Weir, you've purchased materials, you've done a site investigation. Give me a little more detail on what is needed.
Well, we have not purchased any materials. We have flown out to the site to see what materials we would need for that. And as it is right now, we're going to need a boat. We're going to need wood to rebuild the tent platforms. We're going to need new platforms. We're going to need a new substrate rail. We're going to need new floating pickets for that weir. We're going to need to figure out how to get flyer personnel up to Chalatenna, because most of the airports here on the peninsula are exceedingly expensive and would blow that budget pretty much out of the water just on the initial flights for the season. So that's kind of what we're faced with right now as far as our needs for that project.
So if it's funded for 2025 and you're not doing anything now to get ready for 2025, are we going to have a weir?
Well, I never said that we're not doing anything. Right now, we're still trying to figure out the logistical challenges and trying to nail down to what exactly materials we need, while also fitting all of that within the confines of that budget.
Okay, thank you, Kyle.
Hey, Pete, this is Andy. Could I ask a question here?
Go ahead, Andy.
So, just thinking about flying stuff, and if the flying budget is so expensive, wouldn't it be much cheaper to, even if you constructed the weir on the Kenai, the panels, or if you constructed them in the Anchorage or the Matsu, you could fly them certainly much shorter out of Anchorage, or likely even shorter out of Willow. Wouldn't that help your budget to do that? And why wouldn't you do that instead of flying from the Kenai?
Yeah, well, we would have to fly either from Willow, even Talkeetna. We've looked at all of those options. You know, one of the things that we are faced with also is we have to drive all the way from Kenai to take our technicians to move all of those supplies up to other locations, which is a very far drive for our staff as well. So trying to do that on a regular basis is difficult. But again, we are trying to solve some of those logistical challenges, which those challenges do take time.
Well, just one more comment I can't resist. Kyle, I would suggest you contact the Westwood region for logistics, how to move weirs and build weirs, and I think you'd get some good information.
Yeah,
Jim?
I mean, we have even been looking at the option of snow machining out materials in the wintertime once everything freezes up, because that would be a little bit more viable of an option. But again, we've been looking at everything we can and have been reaching out to people. So,
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have just a couple of quick questions for the NOAA folks. The first one was I was very, very interested to see what was going to happen the first few days of when the EEZ reports came in. And my first question is, when the daily reports come in, are they often revised after fish counts reveal a different total, or I noticed a difference in one of the reports. So how does that reporting actually work for the numbers that remain what you consider the most accurate?
Hello, this is Josh Keaton, and I'm the lead for the monitoring branch. And so my staff manages the e-landings program. And so I take it from your question, you're talking about the fish ticket counts or the e-landings numbers.
Yes, the first day, I think, or first or second report, there was a report that 7 or 8 Chinook were caught, and in the following report for the same district, those Chinooks disappeared from the figures, and so I was looking at that.
Okay, so we do a lot of validation on the e-landings reports to ensure that the information is valid and accurate. We had our enforcement agents stationed throughout that also help us check for that validity. There is some discussions going on around how accurate or precise the Chinook salmon estimates are. Some of those salmon were found by our enforcement agents, not necessarily making it on the fish tickets. This was a discussion that was recently had at the North Pacific Fishery Management Council, a concern that we have that the king salmon are not necessarily being reported on the e-landings fish ticket. And we're looking into monitoring options to address that through education and outreach in this next year.
Thank you for that. And the other question I had is something that was broached earlier with the state about any cooperation. Now, I do understand that the feds are not going to take suggestions or anything from the state, but is there anything against the law that keeps the state from the federal and the state officials that are managing essentially the same waters so that they could actually sit down in a room and say what's going on, and not that they have to affect the management decision, but maybe a better management decision might come of it? That's just a question that I don't know the legalities there.
Yeah, thanks for the question. This is Rich Brenner from the National Marine Fisheries Service, and we have a lot of respect for the state. They've been managing upper inlet fisheries since Alaska's statehood, and we value their input, and we'd absolutely appreciate a dialogue with them about in-season management.
Thank you.
Okay, if there's no additional questions, I'd like to provide an opportunity for the commission, NOAA, and Fish and Game for final comments. So with that, let's start with the commission. Kendra?
Yeah, I really appreciate this dialogue. I think we do have some serious issues with the Kings and with the coho, and I think it is going to take cooperation. We have 2 different management systems that are affecting us. The one thing that we didn't bring up that I felt was maybe a little out of the order of this particular meeting, but it is in our questions to NOAA, was also the beluga whale. And there are things that could be done there that we haven't talked about, but I hope NOAA is also looking at that, because that is a concern to some of the people in the Upper Cook Inlet area. But yeah, keep the communication going. We have lots of problems with the fish. I'd like to see as much research as possible, including freshwater research, as part of the action plans going forward, and not just emergency closures, but some actual research on freshwater habitat as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Kendra. Jim?
I'd like to also thank everybody for being here, and I would especially like to note that Mayor Edna DeVries has been here, and Senator Shelley Hughes has come to join us as well. And I remember the first meeting that I went to, it was 2013 or 2014 with this commission, where we had this kind of discussion. Let's just say it wasn't quite as calm. And I really appreciate the fact that we've tried to ask questions in advance, get answers in advance, and discuss them, because I think it goes a long ways towards focusing on the problem, and I really deeply appreciate that. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Jim. Larry?
Mr. Chairman, after listening to this discussion today, particularly the comments from NOAA, I would certainly encourage the commission somewhere down the future, not too far off, to develop a work committee or such to work with NOAA and the North Pacific Fisheries Management Council, much as we do the Board of Fisheries, to have our input into how this future management may take form. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Howard?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I want to echo the thanks that previous commission members have voiced. We appreciate you guys coming up, the Fish and Game staff from both Palmer and the Soldotna area, and the NOAA staff. It's the first time for them, so they may not have realized the potential of what they would be walking into. But I want to thank you guys for coming in, answering very plainly. You know, you don't know, you've got reasons for this, you've got reasons for that. Doesn't mean we're going to agree on everything, but I appreciate the ability to have the discussion. And I just want to wish everybody a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Thanks, Howard. Andy?
Yes, one thing that kind of concerns me is the management of the EEZ compared to the management of state waters. In the state management, there's a requirement for 1 day of fishing a week. And this was back when the state managed the EEZ, and it was 1 day a week. But now in July, when we get to that 1 day a week period, yes, NOAA is managing 1 day a week of fishing out in the middle, but the state has been managing 1 day of week that's different from the federal fishery, and that is placing, in my mind, additional harvests. All of the participants could participate in the NOAA fishery 1 day of the week, and then they could go a second day of the week and participate in the state waters that are open out in the middle. And that is something that I would like to see the state and NOAA work together to reduce that down to 1 day a week, not 2 days. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy, and enjoy that sunshine. Gabe?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Department and NOAA, for, first of all, putting this huge packet together full of harvest data. It's good. I appreciate the summaries. I think historically Cook Inlet has been the state's sandbox. That's been our playground. That's what we manage. And that's not the case anymore as a whole. The EEZ being managed by the federal side of things is maybe not what the state wants, but I would love to see some collaborative management in the future. Whether the management is the same, I don't expect that to ever align. But at least a sharing of information, in-season information. The state obviously has a lot more than the feds do, but I think the information that both bodies are gathering could help the other to manage their portion of the water better. Parker, I want to thank you for the pike suppression work you guys are doing. Research, thank you. And keep up the good work. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Gabe. Bill, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'd like to thank the department also and NOAA for the presentations tonight. Fish and game is definitely not my area of expertise. I'm more into the legislative part of it. And for me, that's what this all came down to, is this is going to help us determine what our legislative priorities are going to be for the upcoming year, and what we're going to need to address with the legislature as a commission, and then for myself as an assembly member, what we want to present to the state legislature as our priorities for the Fish and Game Commission. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill, and I think you and I are there next week, December 19th, right? To their legislatures. I too want to thank NOAA and the department. Very well done. Matt, I know you're going to be, wait, I'm not done, so you put that mic down. Matt has a long history with the department, and he soon will be moving on to greener fields, probably. No, you're not going to die. But Matt will be retiring in May, and we're sure going to miss that expertise that you've brought through all the years. And Sam, I'm glad you're in your new role. And Kyle, just another comment. On the Alaska Peninsula in Kodiak, we teamed up with the Coast Guard quite a bit to help bring our materials into our very remote camps. And I would suggest you get a hold of the National Guard, and I bet you they too would probably embrace training exercises to bring your materials in. It was a great team effort with the Coast Guard on Kodiak, and I'd encourage you to do the same. So Matt, any last words? Oh, go ahead, Bill.
Just real quick, I've got to leave. I've got another meeting in Point McKenzie that I've got to go to.
Okay, well, thank you. Matt, department comments.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, thank you. I just wanted to thank the commission again. I know I always appreciate, and my staff always appreciate coming out and talking to you and the folks out in the valley who attend this meeting. Yeah, I mean, there's a whole lot more to discuss. I certainly encourage anyone with any questions in the public. Your first stop is the area manager, Samantha Oslin there in the Palmer office. I'd be glad to answer questions and have discussions. I mean, there's a whole king salmon broad discussion that, we're unable to have. There has been a lot of research out there. A few of them are mentioned in the questions that we put up. If, and I'm going to agree with Howard, mark this down. I think we're a long ways out from king salmon recovery. And if the research and my understanding of what I'm reading is correct, and we're talking about mostly an ocean productivity issue, people have to be realistic about what the department can and cannot do. So we can make sure we have good habitat for these fish to come back to, and we can try and reduce the mortality. But if this is an ocean productivity issue predominantly, there's not a whole lot we're going to be able to do to bring those king salmon back until whatever conditions in the ocean are not favoring kings changes. So it's going to take some time. I mean, I hope that changes so we can see kings back. We all want to see that. Anyway, enough of that. Final comments. Yeah, thank you. And y'all are in great hands. We've got great fish and game staff. So thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
Hey, Matt, are you ever going to give me that latte you promised me 15 years ago?
Colton, on behalf of Comfish, any closing comments?
Oh, well, kind of hard to follow up Matt there. We're certainly going to miss him. Valuable member of the team, and I have sincerely enjoyed working with him. When I was the Kenai Sportfish manager, I got to work for him. But as the Comfish manager, Matt, Samantha, we all work really well as a team to make this Cook Inlet fishery system work. So just wanted to throw that out there as well. Thank you to the commission for having us. Sorry we couldn't make it in person, but we appreciate the ability to join virtually. And happy holidays, everyone.
Thank you, Colton. Adam, on behalf of NOAA.
Yeah, hi, this is Rich Brenner again, and first of all, I wanted to thank the commission for having NOAA here. It was a pleasure to be here, and I am also going to miss Matt Miller. I think he must owe me a latte as well. I was with the department for 16 years prior to joining NOAA, and yeah, I'm going to miss Matt. We are just to let everybody know where we're at with the federal process right now. National Marine Fisheries Service is working on our 2025 stock assessment fishery evaluation report, and you'll be able to see the preliminary version of that report on the North Pacific Fisheries Management Council website in early January, and then we will be presenting that to the council at the February council meeting in Anchorage, and public comments are welcome at that meeting, and then we hope to get harvest specs recommendations from the council, and we will use those to write a proposed rule with those initial harvest specifications, and we also welcome public comment on that proposed rule with those 2025 harvest specifications. And then we will take public comment into consideration and use that to work on that those will go into the public comment will be taken into account for the final harvest specs, and those will be issued sometime in the spring prior to the 2025 Cook in the EEZ fishery. So that's where we're at with the federal process, and we'll leave that there for now. But yeah, thanks again to the commission, and also it was nice to join our colleagues with the last Department of Fishing game as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I go to Bill, Jim, this would be a good time for you to just give a quick update following up with what was just stated there.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. They just finished their December meeting, and I did check the agenda, but I didn't get it close enough. They actually had a conversation about sport fishing. I don't know exactly what it was, but I now have the link as of today, and I will send it to you in case you want to listen to it. Or no, it's actually they didn't have a recording of the conversation, but they did summarize it and all the items that were discussed. So for the next, the North Pacific Fisheries Management Council is having a special meeting February 3 through 9. And I don't know if that's the one that's going to contain some of the things that Rich Brenner just mentioned. The agenda was not complete on the website, but they have a regular meeting scheduled in Anchorage from March 31st through April 7. And so those are our opportunities. And they have 3 different committees. They have a scientific committee, which doesn't generally do policy. They do a lot of scientific analysis, but they do some pretty amazing stuff. They meet separately, but during the same time of the meeting. Then there is the advisory panel, and that's where policy is reviewed and sent on to the council at large, the council that makes the decisions. And so we have opportunities to have input. And I am very encouraged that there's a possibility that we can get a meeting with them as part of the process. And if there's something that can be done, we've been told that we should work with the advisory panel and during what they call tasking, staff tasking is a place where we can get our issues on the plate. And like most things, it doesn't happen immediately, but it's a place where our voice can be heard. So those things are coming up.
Thank you, Jim. And I think Larry's suggestion where we start there at beginning of the year looking at how we can interject. It's a good idea. Appreciate that. So, Bill.
Thank you. Bill Stoltz. I do work at consultant for the borough. I would, with one person who's not here is Karina Nichols. She showed up for the meeting but hadn't gotten the notice, but she lives here in the valley. She's the reason we have our federal officials here online. I know our staff tried to outreach to them in the summer, and it wasn't until her intervention and that she wanted to be here, but now she had other commitments out of state, but she was here ready to go and wants to be involved in this process. And the good news is Senator Sullivan is currently on the Commerce Committee, the ranking member of the Oceans and Fisheries Committee. Now he was a ranking minority member. Now he'll be the subcommittee chairman. So, and she lives here in the valley. So that continues to be a good outreach. But a lot of our participation at the federal level probably wouldn't have materialized without Senator Sullivan's office and Karina Nichols. So I wanted to acknowledge her participation. Helping this happen, and she certainly wanted to be here, and she was here on the 5th on that horrible day, but so thank you for allowing me to explaining that piece and why they're not here, but they will be an important partner for us in the future.
Thank you. Yes, you may, please.
Thank you, everyone. I'm Shelley Hughes. I also want to acknowledge Mayor DeVries is here. I just noticed that as I was walking up. I want to thank all of you, and we are very fortunate as a delegation that serves you in Juneau to have you as a commission. I don't know that there's any other region of the state that has such a focus and expertise on a commission that can advise us. So I can just tell you, I highly value it. And I appreciate the fact that you're having these discussions with various groups that partner and all have a stake in these things. You know, like I know, how important solving the fish problems are and how difficult they are and how it's going to take time. But communication and relationships are so important to get to the solutions. So I just want to thank you. I look forward to the communication during the session. You may or may not have noticed the governor unveiled his budget today. The numbers are tight. And even though you're going to see new opportunities in Alaska as far as resource development, there's a supply and demand situation where you're probably not going to see oil prices go up. They may say relatively low, which will make it tough on the revenue end. So I just want to tell you that focused research, I think, is important. You all have advocated for that in the past. And I remember back in the years when Bill Stoltz was serving the legislature, we were able to get funds for research, and that was so important. And we will still fight for that, but I will tell you that it's very, very tight. Also, I want to thank Matt. I know that expertise in a department is invaluable, and hopefully there's a good succession plan, and we can continue to work together. But I just want to let you know that we've got a great delegation going down to Juneau. We've got a good team. We've got a few new ones, but I know they're going to be keyed in, and I certainly will convey to them how valuable you are and your insight is to us. And also as we work with Stoltz, and I don't know, is John Harris going to be with us again? They're really good about keeping us informed. And then if some of you make a visit down there, you will definitely be welcome. But one of the things too is there's so many issues that we have to work with. I am not an expert on the things that's why it's so invaluable what you bring to the table. And but we want to do what's best, and so you just keep communicating. I think some of you have my cell phone. Call my office, and you can. I'm going to speak on the behalf of the rest of the delegation. I'm sure they'd be open to that as well. And just so you know, for our Mat-Su delegation, it's Kevin McCabe and I will be the co-chairs for the next 2 years. And Kevin and I have kind of divided up. He's going to kind of take the lead in year 1, and then I'll do year 2. But still, all our doors are open to you. And when you get those priorities mapped out, get them to us, and we'll see what we can do. Thank you all, and for your service, too.
Thank you. So, with that, last chance. No, Howard. No.
Well, I was just going to make another real quick comment.
So, on behalf of the commission, I'd like to thank you all. I also want to wish you the very best this Christmas and a Happy New Year. And we'll see next week. We meet with the legislatures, and the borough manager asked me to be there as well. So December 19th. And Madam Mayor, I'm so glad that you're here. So appreciate it. So with that, is there a...
Move to adjourn.
Is there a second? What, Howard?
I just wanted to comment to Senator Hughes. There's a guy that just got elected out of an Anchorage district for the House named Ted Eichheit. He's a Democrat, but I don't hold that against him. He used to be our borough contact for this commission up until, I don't know, about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago. And Ted is very knowledgeable in a lot of the fisheries and wildlife issues, and he would be a good person for you to talk to on occasion as you want to. And he has connections back up to us, so if you ask him something he doesn't know, he'll turn around and ask us. So it's just another person you can talk to down there.
Is that a second, Howard?
Yes.
So our next meeting will be January 9th at 4 p.m.
19.
No, we did not have enough people respond. So our next meeting will be January 9th at 4 p.m. here. And hearing no objections, this meeting is adjourned.
Merry Christmas.
Yes, this is it, Larry.
Right on time, Pete. 2 minutes to
Yeah, good job. You gotta wrap that on there to say we're adjourned.
I would like to talk, Mr. Chairman, press the agenda. Dr. White would get off on our ultra hours one is long. Press the agenda, Mr. Chair.
Larry, you know what?
I didn't
Hockey
know
game
that.
on TV right now.
I'm confused.
Who's playing?
Kraken and the Bruins.
I bet I don't get it on my channel. For some reason, Dish don't get most of it.
Regular channel.
Oh, it is?
5 points.
I'll see you around.
Just click through the channels, 5
I'll record it as soon as I get home. Because I watch,
Oh, I'll
I
make
watch
some.
hockey games all the time.
Maybe not in the dead of winter because I don't like driving at night, but I'll be back. I'm like a bad habit. I never totally go away.
You like Arnold sub chat. Broadcasting also. Game practice every couple 3 days.
I haven't been able to hook up with it. I don't know why. I certainly like to watch it. They lost the last game in shootout at the end. They tied, you know, then they go up.
That's not a game of that. They came from behind. Somebody back there. They made a hurricane. But,